They say silence is golden. I've come to believe that's a lie, told by people who have never had to live inside a real one. Gold is valuable, it's sought after. But true silence, the kind I'm talking about, is a vacuum. It's a negative space, a void carved out of your life where a person, a voice, a laugh used to be. It's the heaviest, densest thing in the universe. It's the sound of a future that has been canceled. It's been a year, maybe more. I've stopped counting the months. A year since I learned the true weight of silence, the kind of profound, deafening quiet that follows the single, loudest, most destructive sentence you will ever speak. I play it back in my head constantly. It's not even a choice anymore. It's just there, a film reel that starts running the moment my mind goes idle. Waiting in line for coffee, driving home from work, lying in bed staring at the ceiling. The scene is always the same, rendered in hyper-realistic detail. The warmth of his parents' dining room, the specific, comforting smell of roasted turkey, sage, and his mom's cinnamon apple pie cooling on the counter. The muffled drone of the Browns game from the big TV in the den, a sound that was the backdrop to every holiday in that house. The soft clinking of silverware on porcelain plates, and his face, the look on his face when my words landed. Then, the silence. The silence when he stood up from the table, his movements unnervingly calm, pushed his chair in so gently it didn't make a sound, and walked out of my life, leaving me stranded in the smoking crater I had just made of our world. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue or defend himself. In the twisted landscape of my regret, I find myself wishing he had. A fight feels like engagement. A fight, even a terrible one, is a negotiation. It implies there's something left on the table worth fighting for. But his silence was a verdict. It was a closing statement. The case was closed. And the most sickening part, the part that churns in my stomach in the dead of night, is that I was the one who brought the charges. I was the prosecutor, the jury, the judge, and the executioner of my own happiness. It wasn't always like this. It's important to remember that. It's important to remember the beginning, if only to understand the ending. I met Liam 3 years ago. I was 26, freshly wounded from a messy breakup, and utterly convinced that my romantic future was a barren wasteland. My best friend Jessica had a different idea. Her idea involved dragging my moping self off the couch and into the world, which on that particular Tuesday night was a place called Land Grant Brewing in downtown Columbus. The air inside was thick with the smell of hops and fried food, and the floor had that sticky but clean feeling unique to breweries. It was trivia night. My idea of a good time was not, and has never been, public displays of my ignorance, and our team, consisting of me and Jessica, was a train wreck. We were clueless. The capital of Mongolia, the periodic symbol for tungsten, the name of the drummer for The Who, blank, blank, and blank. We were laughing about how terrible we were when a voice from the table next to us, a low and steady voice, leaned over. "It's Keith Moon," he said. He had a small smile that didn't show his teeth, but made the corners of his eyes crinkle in a way that felt kind. That was Liam. He wasn't my type. At least, not the type I had curated for myself. My exes were men who looked good on paper, and even better on an Instagram grid. They worked in finance or marketing, they wore tailored shirts, and they used words like synergy and optics without a trace of irony. Liam was tangible. He was an electrician. His forearms were strong, and his hands, I noticed when he picked up his beer, were calloused and clean, with neatly trimmed nails that couldn't hide the fact that he worked with them for a living. He wore a faded Ohio State Buckeyes t-shirt and a pair of worn-in jeans. He had a stillness about him, a quiet confidence that was the polar opposite of the anxious, performative energy of the men I was used to. He wasn't trying to be seen. He was just seeing. His table, a group of equally down-to-earth guys who all seemed to have known each other since they were kids, ended up merging with ours. We still came in second to last, but I hadn't laughed that hard in years. A real, breathless, side-aching laugh. He didn't tell jokes so much as he told stories. He had a dry, observational humor, and he talked about his work like it was a daily adventure. He described the strange time capsules he'd find inside the walls of old houses in German Village or Clintonville. A Prohibition-era whiskey bottle, a bundle of love letters from the 1940s tied with a faded ribbon, a perfectly preserved box of Cracker Jacks from the 70s. He made running wires sound like a form of urban archaeology. He made me see the magic in the mundane. When the night wound down, he walked me and Jessica to the door. There were no clever lines, no strategic waiting period. He just turned to me under the yellow glow of the street lamp and said, "I had a really great time tonight, Chloe. I'd like to do it again, if you would." It was so direct, so refreshingly simple, that it caught me off guard. I remember Jessica watching him walk away to his slightly beaten-up Ford Ranger. "An electrician, huh?" she'd said, her tone a mix of curiosity and something bordering on condescension. "Well, he's kind of hot in that rugged, I can actually fix things instead of just calling someone kind of way." I found myself feeling defensive of him, a man I had known for all of 3 hours. I ignored her smirk. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the optics. I was just thinking that I really, really wanted to see him again. Our first few months felt like a secret I was keeping, a treasure only I knew about. It was a world away from the life of performative expense I was used to. We didn't do the trendy restaurants in the short north where a cocktail cost $20. Our idea of a 5-star meal was grabbing tacos from the Los Guachos truck and eating them on the hood of his truck. Our dates were long, meandering walks through the Park of Roses, where he'd patiently listen to me talk about my third graders, remembering their names and the funny things they'd say. He'd listen with an intensity that made me feel like the most interesting person in the world. I remember one Saturday in October. The air was crisp, and the leaves were a riot of orange and red. We spent the whole afternoon walking through the trails at High Banks Metro Park. We didn't talk about anything important, really. We talked about our favorite childhood cartoons, our most embarrassing high school moments, our secret, irrational fears. I learned he was terrified of moths. I admitted I couldn't sleep if a closet door was even slightly ajar. It was simple, meaningless, and yet it felt more intimate than any conversation I'd ever had with my exes about 5-year plans and stock portfolios. He held my hand, his calloused fingers intertwined with mine, and it felt like an anchor in a world that always felt like it was spinning too fast. He felt like home, a home I never knew I was craving. He wasn't ambitious in the way my world defined it. He wasn't climbing a corporate ladder. He was a craftsman. He took a deep, quiet pride in his work, in leaving a place better and safer than he found it. He dreamed of starting his own small business one day. "Liam's Electric, LLC, he'd say with a self-deprecating grin. Catchy, right? His dream wasn't about building an empire or making a fortune. It was about freedom. The freedom to set his own hours, to be his own boss, to build a reputation based on his own name and his own hard work. It was a solid, tangible dream. I found it endearing. Back then, I found his solidity to be a comfort, a rock to build on. I just didn't realize I would be the one to eventually pick up that rock and use it to smash everything we had. I look back at that Chloe, the one walking through the park, holding his hand, and I want to scream at her. I want to grab her by the shoulders and shake her and say, "Pay attention. This is the good part. This is the real part. Don't you dare take this for granted." It's a haunting question I think many of us have to face eventually. Have you ever looked back on a golden period of your life and realized you were so busy looking ahead to the next thing, you failed to appreciate the beauty of where you were? It's like trying to catch smoke. You only realize what you had when it's already slipped through your fingers. The shift was insidious, a slow, creeping poison that I willingly drank, cup by cup. And my best friend Jessica was the bartender. She didn't mean to be, I know that. She loved me in her way. But her reality was a carefully curated fantasy, and she was a very persuasive tour guide. Her fiancé, Mark, was a management consultant who measured his life in airline status tiers and hotel points. Her world was a revolving door of weekend trips, client dinners, and gifts that came in signature-colored boxes. Her Instagram feed was a weapon of mass dissatisfaction. "Oh my God, Chloe, you have to see the suite Mark booked for us in Chicago this weekend," she'd say, shoving her phone in my face. The photo would be of her, wrapped in a fluffy hotel robe, holding a glass of champagne, with a panoramic view of the city skyline behind her. "He got upgraded because of his status. Isn't he the best?" I'd force a smile and say, "Wow, Jess, that's incredible," and a little piece of my own contentment would wither and die. The comparisons became a constant, corrosive drip in the back of my mind. My birthday was in May. A week before, Liam spent an entire weekend in the garage of his parents' house. He came home with sawdust in his hair and a triumphant smile on his face. He had built me a bookshelf. It was beautiful, made of dark cherry wood, with intricate little details he'd carved into the sides. It was sturdy and perfect, and made specifically for the little nook in our apartment that was overflowing with my books. He had listened. He had seen my need and filled it with his own 2 hands, with his own time and love. He was so proud, and I was grateful. I was. But as I ran my hand over the smooth wood, a toxic thought wormed its way into my brain. This won't look good on Instagram. There was no destination tag. There was no brand name. It was just a bookshelf. It was a testament to his love, and all I could see was its lack of social currency. I gave him a hug and told him I loved it, and the lie tasted like ash in my mouth. He was so attuned to me that he must have sensed it. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. "You okay?" he asked. "You seem quiet." I just smiled wider and said, "It's perfect. I'm just overwhelmed." Another lie, to cover the first one. That was the beginning of the Great Divide. Our life, which had once felt rich and full, began to feel lacking through the filter of Jessica's life. Our quiet nights watching movies felt boring. Our hikes at Hocking Hills felt provincial. Liam's steady practicality, the very thing that made me feel so safe, now felt like a cage. It was a constant reminder of the life of effortless glamour I wasn't living. So I started to build a new life, a secret one. I opened a credit card he knew nothing about. It was my emergency card, I told myself. But the emergencies started looking a lot like a new pair of boots, or a spa day, or a dress I couldn't afford but felt I needed for a school event. I wasn't just lying to him anymore. I was lying to myself. I told myself I was maintaining my independence, but what I was really doing was building a life raft of materialism to escape the perfectly good ship we were sailing on together. The first major crack, the one that sent a shudder through the whole foundation, was over a vacation. Jessica and Mark were planning a 10-day trip to Italy. "Chloe, you and Liam have to come. We'll rent a villa in Tuscany. We'll drink wine and eat pasta and forget all our problems. It'll be epic." The way she said it was a decree, not an invitation. My heart leaped at the thought. Italy. It was a dream. But I knew, with a sinking certainty, what Liam would say. We were saving. Every extra dollar went into a high-yield savings account meticulously labeled Future House. He had a spreadsheet and everything. He was so proud of our progress. When I brought it up to him that night, I tried to be casual. He was sitting at the kitchen table, sketching out a wiring diagram for a job. He looked up, his pencil behind his ear, and listened. As I talked, I could see the calculations running in his head. I saw the dream of Italy clash with the dream of a front porch and a backyard. "Chloe," he said, his voice gentle and full of apology. "That sounds like the trip of a lifetime. It really does. But a trip like that would wipe out our savings. It would set us back a whole year, maybe more. We're so close to having enough for a down payment." He reached across the table and took my hand. "What if we did something special here? We could take a long weekend, drive up to Traverse City in Michigan, stay at a nice bed and breakfast on the lake. We could make our own adventure." The old Chloe would have seen the love in that offer. The old Chloe would have loved that idea. But I wasn't the old Chloe anymore. I was a person infected with the disease of more. A hot, furious shame washed over me. "Traverse City?" I said, pulling my hand away. My voice was sharp, cutting. "That's your alternative to Tuscany? Liam, my friends are going to Italy. They're going to be drinking Chianti under the Tuscan sun, and you want me to get excited about a lake in Michigan? Do you hear how that sounds?" The look on his face should have been a red flag the size of a planet. It wasn't anger. It was a deep, profound hurt. A confusion. It was the look of a man who thought he was playing on a team, only to find out his teammate was competing against him. I thought the house was our shared dream," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It is," I insisted, my volume rising to cover the weakness of my argument. "But does that mean our lives have to stop? Does it mean I'm not allowed to want nice things? I work hard too, Liam. I'm a teacher. It's not easy. I deserve a real vacation." I didn't go to Italy, but I did go away that weekend. I told Liam I had to attend a mandatory teachers' conference in Chicago. In reality, Jessica and I went on a lavish shopping spree, funded entirely by my secret credit card. We stayed in a fancy hotel on the Magnificent Mile. I bought a designer bag I didn't need and posted a picture of it, artfully arranged next to a mimosa at brunch. The caption was full of hashtags about professional growth and investing in myself. The lie felt powerful in the moment, a declaration of my independence. But it left a greasy, sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. The wall I was building between us was getting higher, and I was so focused on the view from the top, I didn't realize I was bricking myself inside. Have you ever done that? Told a lie that felt liberating for a second, only to realize it had become a cage? Each lie requires another, bigger lie to prop it up. It's a house of cards, and you're living inside it, terrified of the slightest breeze. It's a full-time job, and the only payment is a constant low-grade anxiety. My resentment metastasized. It turned into criticism. I started chipping away at him, piece by piece, with little comments designed to make him feel small. "Are you really going to wear that old shirt to my school's fundraiser? All the other husbands will be in suits. Could we please take my car? Your truck is just... I don't know. It's a little embarrassing. Did you have to tell that story about the squirrel again? My friends don't really get your job." Each word was a tiny, sharp stone I was throwing at the man I claimed to love. I was trying to mold him, to polish him, to turn him into a man who would fit neatly into Jessica's world. I was trying to turn him into Mark. I was systematically destroying the very man I had fallen in love with, and I called it helping him improve. He rarely fought back. He'd just retreat into that infuriating quiet. He would absorb the blow, that sad half-smile would appear on his face, and he would change the subject. He was a peacemaker, desperately trying to hold our fragile world together while I was swinging a sledgehammer. Which brings us to that Thursday in November, Thanksgiving, the Super Bowl of familial obligation. The drive to his parents' house in the suburbs was tense. I was already nursing a headache, anticipating the performance I would have to give. The performance of the happy, supportive girlfriend. The air in their house was warm and heavy, thick with the comforting smells of a holiday meal and the suffocating weight of my own bad mood. Liam's family was wonderful, painfully so. His mother, Carol, was the kind of warm, nurturing woman who made you feel instantly at home. She remembered that I loved her pecan pie and had made a special one, just for me. His father, David, was a man of few words but deep kindness, a man whose steadiness was mirrored in his son. And his sister, Megan. Megan was whip-smart and had eyes that didn't miss a thing. I always felt like she was looking at my soul, and I knew mine was not looking its best. I was 2 glasses of wine deep before the turkey was even carved, the alcohol a welcome buffer against the relentless, cheerful wholesomeness of it all. The conversation eventually, inevitably, turned to the future. Megan was talking about applying to law school. Then David, pausing with the carving knife in his hand, turned his attention to Liam. "So, son," he said, his voice full of paternal pride. "How's that business plan coming along? You still thinking of taking the leap and going out on your own after the new year?" Liam's entire posture changed. He sat up straighter, and his face lit up with a genuine, unburdened smile, the first I had seen from him in weeks. "Yeah, Dad, I think I am. The numbers are finally looking solid. If Chloe and I can really stick to the budget for another 6 months, I'll have enough for a reliable used van and the essential equipment to get started. It's terrifying, but it feels like the right thing to do." "Oh, Liam, honey, that's just wonderful." His mom beamed, reaching over to pat his arm. "It's always better to build something for yourself, something real. It's not about getting rich overnight. It's about being proud of the work you do. Your father and I, we started with less than nothing, but we were a team, and we believed in each other." She looked over at me then, her eyes shining, and smiled, trying to pull me into the circle of their warmth. "You two are such a great team." And that was it. That was the spark that lit the fuse. Team, budget, starting with nothing, believed in each other. In the warped, wine-soaked funhouse mirror of my mind, all I heard was a judgment, a condemnation. "You are the problem. Your expensive tastes are holding my perfect son back from his noble, humble dreams." The resentment from the Napa trip, the shame of the secret credit card, the pressure to be someone I wasn't, it all coalesced into a single, white-hot point of rage in my chest. A short, sharp laugh escaped my lips. It was a harsh, ugly sound in the warm, happy room. The conversation stopped. The clinking of forks stopped. Everyone turned to look at me. Liam's hand found my arm under the table, his grip a gentle warning. "Chloe," he said, his voice low and tight. I yanked my arm away as if his touch had burned me. I turned my full attention to his mother, my face stretching into a smile that was all teeth. "That's a really sweet story, Carol. A lovely sentiment. But I'm not really the start with nothing and be proud of it type, you see." My voice was high and brittle. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a character in a movie. I have my own ambitions, my own career. And frankly, I said, finally turning my cold gaze on Liam, my voice dropping into a register of pure, calculated cruelty, I don't need him or his shoestring budget to get what I want in life. I'll be just fine on my own. There they were, the words, the 11 words that would detonate my entire world. I don't need him. I'll be just fine on my own. They hung in the air between us, shimmering with venom. I watched with that same horrifying detachment as the color drained from Liam's face. I saw his mother's smile shatter, her hand flying to her mouth. I saw his father's jaw clench, a muscle twitching in his cheek. And I saw his sister, Megan, look at me with a glare so cold it could have frozen fire. I was braced for the explosion, for the yelling, for the accusations. I was ready for the fight I had been spoiling for months. But Liam did something far more devastating. He calmly, deliberately, placed his fork and his knife down on his plate, perfectly parallel to each other. He took a long, slow sip of his water. He picked up his cloth napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table beside his plate. And then he looked at me. His eyes, the kind, gentle eyes I had fallen in love with, were utterly vacant. There was no anger. There was no sadness. There was just nothing. It was the look you would give a stranger who had bumped into you on the street. A stranger you would forget in the next second. He stood up. His movements were fluid and silent. He pushed his heavy oak chair in under the table without making a single sound. He looked at his parents, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for dinner," he said, his voice perfectly even, betraying no emotion at all. It was delicious. And then, without a single backward glance in my direction, he turned and walked out of the dining room. I listened to his footsteps on the hardwood floor of the hallway, the sound of the front door opening, and the soft, final click of it closing behind him. And then, silence. A silence so absolute, so heavy, it felt like the pressure of the deep ocean. I was left there, a statue at the center of the devastation, the only sound the frantic, useless beating of my own heart. Megan drove me home. It's a 25-minute drive from their house in Westerville to my apartment in the city. She didn't say a word, not one. I sat in the passenger seat of her car, staring out at the blur of suburban Christmas lights, drowning in the loudest silence I had ever known. It was an active, hostile silence. It was filled with all the things she was too well-mannered to scream at me. The air crackled with her contempt. I kept opening my mouth to say something, an apology, an excuse, anything, but the words wouldn't come. What was there to say? When we pulled up in front of my building, I unbuckled my seatbelt and mumbled, "Thanks for the ride." She just gave a sharp, curt nod, her eyes fixed straight ahead. That was the last time I ever spoke to or saw any member of his family. I walked into our apartment. My apartment now. The word echoed in the empty space. It was dark and cold. I still, stupidly, expected him to be there. I was still braced for the fight that was never going to come. But the apartment was empty. His beat-up Ford Ranger was not in its usual spot in the parking lot. My anger, my righteous indignation, was the first emotion to surface. It was a shield. I grabbed my phone and called him, straight to voicemail. I sent a furious text. "Are you serious? You just walked out and left me there with your family? How could you be so childish?" I stared at the phone, waiting for the 3 dots of his reply to appear. They never did. A few minutes later, another text. "Okay. That was incredibly rude and disrespectful, Liam. You owe me an apology. Call me." Only silence answered. By midnight, the anger had burned itself out, leaving behind the cold, slimy residue of fear. The shield was gone, and I was exposed. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed where we had slept every night for 2 years, and I started to feel the true scale of the earthquake I had caused. My texts became pleading. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I was just stressed out and I'd had too much wine. Please come home. We can talk about this." I watched the message on my phone. Delivered. A single gray check mark. It never turned blue. He never even read it. I fell into a fitful sleep. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming through the window, and for a split second, everything was normal. Then I rolled over. His side of the bed was cold and perfectly made. And I knew. I got up and walked through the apartment. It was a scavenger hunt of absence. Half the clothes in his closet were gone. His toothbrush and razor were missing from the bathroom cup. His worn-out work boots, the ones he always left by the front door, were gone. He had come in the night while I was sleeping and quietly, efficiently, surgically removed himself from my life. He left no note. He left no mess. He just left a void. The following weeks were a masterclass in humiliation and panic. Reality came for me, fast and hard. The bill for my secret credit card arrived, a staggering 5-digit number that made me feel dizzy. The rent was due in a week, a sum I now had to cover entirely on my own. My aging Honda, as if on cue, began making a terrifying clanking sound, the kind of sound Liam would have been able to diagnose from 100 yards away. Every single practical adult problem that Liam had always quietly and competently handled was now mine, and mine alone. I had screamed to the universe that I didn't need him, and the universe, it seemed, had replied, "Okay, honey, show me." The social fallout was just as brutal. Our mutual friends, understandably, took his side. Invitations to group hangouts stopped coming. My phone grew quiet. Jessica tried to be supportive, in her own misguided way. "Good for you," she chirped over brunch, a brunch I could barely afford. "You're free. You don't need that kind of small-town negativity holding you back. This is the start of your new, fabulous life." But when I had to start saying no to our weekly shopping trips and fancy dinners, her calls became less and less frequent. My financial reality was an inconvenience to her fantasy. I'm still here. I had to move out of our apartment. I live in a smaller, older studio across town. I sold the designer bag, the expensive boots, and most of the other trinkets of my secret life to scrape together enough money for the security deposit and first month's rent. I've learned how to create a budget, a real one. I learned how to check the oil in my car. I learned how to eat alone, sleep alone, exist alone. I am surviving. But I've learned there is a vast, cavernous difference between surviving and living. A few weeks ago, I fell down a rabbit hole on Facebook. It's a special kind of self-flagellation, looking up the past. I ended up on the page of one of Liam's cousins. She had posted a whole album of photos from a 4th of July barbecue. And there he was. He was standing by a big charcoal grill, laughing, a bottle of beer in his hand. He looked good. More than good. He looked happy. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. He had a tan, and his shoulders seemed broader. His arm was draped casually around the waist of a woman I'd never seen before. She wasn't a model or an influencer. She was just pretty, with a bright, easy smile, and she was looking up at him like he was the only person in the world. And there, parked in the driveway behind them, so clear it made my breath catch in my throat, was a clean, white work van. On the side, in simple, professional blue lettering, were the words, "Liam's Electric." He'd done it. All of it. He'd started his business. He'd probably gotten the house. He'd found a new teammate, one who knew the value of the game plan. He had built the exact life we were supposed to build together. He had just, very wisely, replaced the architect who had tried to burn down the blueprints. Seeing that picture, it was like the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I finally understood, with a clarity that was both blinding and soul-crushing. The issue was never about money, not really. It was about value. I had thrown away a man of immense value because I was chasing things that had none. I didn't need him to buy me a fancy life. He needed me to believe in the real one we could build together. And I had failed him. I had failed us. So that's my story. It's not a story about a bad man or a dramatic breakup. It's a quiet, pathetic story about my own colossal failure of character. It's the story of how my pride, my insecurity, and my desperate need for external validation made me throw away the only truly good thing I ever had. And it leaves me, in the heavy silence of this small apartment, with the one question that circles my mind on an endless loop, the one question I now want to ask you. How do you even begin to forgive yourself when you're the one who broke your own heart?